Participating in Zoom calls from and mention your name. Oh, yeah? It was nice.
I never did it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I had babysitting last night. I'm Sue, ready? Well, good evening. We're honored to have you with us this evening. My name is Bill Pike. I'm the Director of Operations here at Trinity. And this is our 8th community conversation. And this evening we'll be learning from our guest, Dr. Jamelle S. Wilson. Dr. Wilson is Dean for the School of Professional and Continuing Studies at the University of Richmond. For the audience, the first 45 minutes we'll be talking with Dr. Wilson, and then the last 15 minutes we'll take your questions. If you're watching at home, you'll use the chat box feature. Our associate pastor is monitoring that, and he'll send me those questions. If you're here in the sanctuary, we simply ask that you go to the microphone in the middle of the room and ask your questions. So, Dr. Wilson, we thank you again for joining us this evening, and yes, you will need that microphone, so that was a good move. And so let's get started. And I want you to relax. I say this to every guest. I'm not going to ask you anything that you can't handle, but if I do, okay, you can.
I've been a school superintendent. I know how to navigate those.
I know you do, but you can plead the fifth if you want to, okay? So, you know, this is an opportunity for us to learn about you, learn about your work, and we appreciate you being here. I'm going to start a little differently tonight. You work today, right?
I did.
Okay. So I'm wondering if you could maybe recap your day.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And just kind of walk us through what the day was like. And if you can do that, then I'm going to take you back in your past a little bit.
Okay. Well, wow, I appreciate that, and thank you so much for inviting me. And I don't know about you all, but since COVID, the days all run together. And I heard someone say it's actually not a particular day, it's actually Blur's Day. So today's technically Thursday, but it's really a Blur's Day. So my day began actually with coffee with a gentleman who's a member of our Osher Institute for Lifelong Learning. And we had a great conversation. We scheduled an hour. We went an hour and 10 minutes, where we had the opportunity to talk about our shared experiences, his curiosity about my career path, and things that I might offer to him as he's trying to utilize his areas of expertise and interest to have an impact on the community. So that was 9:30 to 10:40 or so. And then I had a meeting at 11 with one of my direct reports to talk about his performance or areas of focus for the year and kind of how he felt like things were going. I think that was 11. And then from there, that was 11 to 12. And then I had a lunch meeting with dean colleagues. I was late, so 12:15 to 1:15. I had a 1:30 call. That 1:30 call lasted until, that was a meeting actually, 1:30 to 2:15. And then I had a 3:30 call, and then had a lot of I have a deliverable that I'm trying to work on for tomorrow, so I spent the remainder of time before coming here working on that, and I looked at my watch and it said 6:25, and I said, I gotta go. So, you know, cram everything into a bag, and here I am.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that, and I know you're used to action-packed days, so I want you to keep in mind what you just told us, and I want you to compare today to a day when you were superintendent, when you were principal, assistant principal, or your first year as a teacher.
Oh, wow. Okay. So thank you. So shoving things in a bag. takes me back to my first year as a classroom teacher. So I started my teaching career at Lee Davis, what was Lee Davis High School at the time. And I taught 9th grade, 10th grade, and 12th grade English.
Okay.
I lived by myself, loved it. First time, really living by myself, on my own, I'm grown. So I lived in a townhouse off of Staples Mill Road.
All right.
And my routine was get up in the morning, of course, make the way out the door to work, come back, work all day, stay until about 6 or so, it's getting dark, come home, stop at the front door. The kitchen was to the left, and the stairway was to the right. So I dropped my bag, my work bag, at the stairs, walk into the kitchen, make a sandwich or grab whatever it was I was going to have for dinner. Yeah. Take that, pick up the bag, walk up the steps, get out of the work clothes, wash my face, eat while I'm grading papers. I was an English teacher, grading papers, fall asleep with papers all around me, wake up in the morning, take a shower, wash my face, get dressed, pull the papers back together, put them in the bag, go downstairs, drop the bag, literally go into the kitchen, get a cup of coffee, walk out the door, and that was the repeat, right? I was on repeat. Weekends were very much the same. I was engaged, got engaged soon after coming to the Richmond area. So, you find time to spend with your significant other, but it was papers, and I assigned a lot of papers. And I felt like it was important, if I'm expecting students to put the time in to write, I have to put the time in to respond. And grade, but the response.
Where'd you grow up? A little bit about education. I know a little bit about your career path, but maybe about where you grew up in that education, and then we'll go from there.
So I grew up in Spotsylvania County. If you know Spotsylvania, you may think of Route 3, the Spotsylvania Mall area with the new town center. But when I was growing up, of course, that wasn't all quite there. And the southern end of Spotsylvania touches the northern tip of Hanover County. And what connects the two was a little one-lane bridge. So it is a small town. Partlow is actually the area that it's named. Our mailing address, though it was Spotsylvania County, the mailing address was actually Beaver Dam. And if you know, Beaver Dam is in Hanover. And that's because the closest post office to our home was actually in Hanover. So rural, very rural, poor, frankly. I spent a lot of time with my grandparents. My mother was a nurse, and so she worked shifts. Which means that as young children, we had to be with somebody, so we were with my grandparents, and their house is right on the corner. So, you get off the bus and you go to grandmama's house until mom gets home from work, and then you go home, and the way our home place was situated, grandparents here on the corner, our house, my aunt's house, my uncle's house, another uncle here, so really family-oriented. My great-grandmother was across the road. Road, notice I said road, not street. Yeah. No street lights. So grew up there in Spotsylvania and had the great fortune to be recognized, I guess, for some aptitude, scholastic aptitude, and I was identified as gifted and talented, and I truly believe that had I not been tapped as gifted and talented, that all of the other things that I've had the opportunity to do would not have been possible. I am a first-generation college attendee. Okay. Neither of my grandparents went to college. My grandfather actually stopped formal schooling at 4th grade. My grandmother, and he's from Philadelphia, was from Philadelphia. My grandmother did complete high school, and she graduated high school and moved to Washington, D.C. to work as a clerical assistant of some sort. Met my grandfather, this dapper, debonair gentleman, married, and he dragged her, I think, to this rural place to live across the road from his mama. And my grandmother actually always, I believe, wanted to go to college, but did not have the opportunity. She married young and started having babies. She had 6 children.
Wow.
And she, though, said to me, "You will go to college." She wanted me to go to St. Paul's, an HBCU.
Yes.
I don't know why, St. Paul's, particularly because she was from Birmingham, so I'm not certain why. But she knew that she wanted me to go to college. And it was her, I think, prayer and determination that I was going to go. I didn't know what it meant to go to college, right? I mean, it's an idea.
Sure.
So I didn't have any role models in my home or in my family.
Right.
My mother, 2 of her sisters, and 1 of her brothers are all in the nursing field.
Okay.
2 uncles were electricians.
Okay.
So trades people.
Yes.
My grandfather was a bricklayer and a farmer. We had like 6 gardens and whatnot, you know, and he would grow all of this produce, and we would, during the summers, we would pick on Thursdays and Fridays to go to market on Saturday morning. My grandmother would bake pies and take orders, so she was baking on Fridays to deliver on Saturday, and we would go with them.
Sure.
Long-winded way of saying I didn't have a role model for what college meant.
Yeah.
So I mentioned I was tapped as gifted and talented, which put me in the presence of other young people like me, as well as teachers and counselors who were talking about college, not necessarily talking to me about college, but talking about college. And so I think that planted the seed, or at least gave me a roadmap for how I would get where I am supposed to be. And so I followed whatever I saw other people doing. I mimicked them. I followed them. There was a boy who lived down the road from us who took Latin, and I came home and said to my mother, "I'm going to take Latin." "What? Why?" "No, you don't need to take Latin." And she was "You don't need to do," because she didn't. And I said, I know I need to do this. And that was a point of contention for us because she didn't understand it. I didn't really understand it. I just knew that I should be following somebody who looked like they knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
And it sounded right, you know what I mean? So yeah, that's, again, a long-winded way of answering your question.
Well, it's a fascinating story, and it really makes it drive home to the point how important family is. Look what you had in that community. And I think the other thing that it says is that somehow along the way, you were a good listener, and that's so important. But thank you for sharing that. Do you remember the moment when you decided that you wanted to teach and lead in education?
I remember the moment when I realized that my going to college to be a medical doctor was not going to happen. That was at the point when I got that grade from college calculus and the other one from college chemistry. And I said, no, I don't think medicine is in my future. And so I was on academic probation after that first year of school, and I had to boost my grade. So I stayed for summer school, and I took an English class with a Jesuit priest, Father Brown, Joseph Brown, on African American literature. And I was the only first year, between first and second year, only first year student in the class. The others were upperclassmen. Many of them were athletes. And the text that we were assigned to read was Their Eyes Were Watching God. And Father Brown asked the question, well, what do you think the title of this book means? How does it resonate with the rest of the book? And so I gave my answer. I don't remember what I said. And he stood, and he was a very, dramatic individual. Ms. Smith, you have just failed my class. Now, remember, I'm coming off of a rocky first year, right, where I literally tanked in 2 classes. So I'm a little worried.
Right.
And he said, well, because if you have just said that, what am I supposed to teach for the rest of the summer? I was like, ooh, I found my people. And so that then said to me, English is something that I can do. Right. And then I remembered, Bill, that books, I've always loved books. When I was 10 years old, for Christmas, the year that I was 10 years old, I asked my mother for books. I didn't want toys.
Sure.
I wanted books. And I've always loved them. So that was the moment when I decided that English was what I would do. How I would apply that, though I didn't quite know. Right. Of course, go to law school, but I don't know how, at the time, the Curry School of Education became kind of where I would land, but I knew I needed to use my love
right.
of books in some way.
Well, we're glad you didn't go to law school. You kind of maybe get a little bit hint of this, but as that undergraduate student at the University of Virginia, what was your biggest adjustment, your biggest challenge? And I think you just kind of walked us through that, but would you add anything to that?
So I think a number of people find it, so in high school, I didn't have to study, I was studious, but I didn't really feel like I had to put a whole lot of effort in it, into it, and I did well. And then you go to college and you realize everybody's better than you, right, or just like that, and you really do have to work. And I had not developed good study skills, and that was an aha, and it was hard for me to acknowledge, right? It's hard to say what you are not or what you need and ask for help, and that was really, really hard for me. Had I found my voice and been willing to admit what I needed, maybe college chemistry and college calculus would have had a different outcome. And then maybe it would have been a different path for me, but then I say, I'm on the right path. I've done what I'm supposed to do.
I would agree with that assessment wholeheartedly. Let's go back and talk about student teaching for a minute. Where did you complete your student teaching experience, and what was your most significant takeaway in working with your cooperating teacher?
So I student taught at Burnley Middle School in Albemarle, and the takeaway was actually from my professors. Professor Margot Figgins was her name, and she whipped me into shape. She said, "You're not cut out to be a teacher." I was like, well, no. Yes, I am. But it was her way of saying, and she said directly, you are not doing as much as you can do, as much as you are capable of doing in the classroom. So you need to decide if this is the profession that you really want. And so she made me really think about teaching as a profession and not just teaching as a job. And that was key for me in terms of how I approached, my work in the classroom, as well as, the other roles that I've had the opportunity to serve in. I can define the level to which I will apply myself, and it is a reflection of me. Right? So.
Well, it's interesting to me how you've hung on to those words. I can remember having a summer job one time where I drove a mail run for a textile company. And I remember the first week of that job, one of the night watchmen at some plant where I had to drop stuff off, he said, "You won't make it a week." And at the end of the summer, I was still there. So it's
what was the level of having to prove to yourself and to others that, yes, I'm more than what you see, what you think you see.
Right. So you complete student teaching, you graduate with a BA, and you also earn a master's in teaching. So you're looking for a teaching job at some point. What was that process like?
Yeah, so again, kind of the way things happen the way, I believe, the way they're supposed to happen. So, and I'm going to go a little bit beyond my first teaching job to one of my other roles. So, of course, school divisions go to college campuses and university campuses to recruit. And I had an interview with a gentleman from Hanover County. His name was Elwood Kelly. And you know when you meet people, they just feel familiar. He made me feel so relaxed and like I wanted to work wherever he was. If he was in this place, I really wanted to be there, right? So he was a he really did it. And so he was my first interview, and then he passed my name on to Harold Stills, who was the assistant director for human resources at the time. He interviewed me, and they offered me the opportunity to come to Hanover to interview with the principal, and Jonathan Lewis was the principal at Lee Davis at the time, and he was kind enough to offer me my first teaching job. And I was so thankful. That was the year actually that Atlee High School opened, which is why there were openings at Lee Davis, because a number of teachers were transferred to the new school. So fast forward a little bit, kind of, you know, how things fall into place the way they're supposed to. So I was a classroom teacher for a total of 5 years. 2 of those 5 years, I was also doubling as a curriculum specialist. From there, I went to be assistant principal, and then Caroline County for a year as principal, and then I was ready to come back to Hanover as principal. There were no openings when I left Hanover from the assistant principal role. There were no principal positions in Hanover, so I went to Caroline. The following year, there were 4 openings. The first, and I believe that I was a model employee when I was in Hanover. I did everything that I was asked to do. I was on time, you know, all of those things. Yet, Jamelle, will you? Yes, I will. So, of course, there will be an opportunity for me to come back. So forgive me for this long story. But, so the first school that was, where there was an opening was Washington Henry Elementary School, which is in the central part of the county. I interviewed with the panel. I interviewed with the superintendent, didn't get the job. Okay, all right. Second school that was open was Mechanicsville Elementary. Interviewed with the panel, made it to the superintendent, didn't get the job. So now I'm getting a little bit worried because I had already tendered my letter of resignation in Caroline because I knew that I just felt like I'm going to come back because I was that sure of myself. I know, right? You're looking at your face, right? That's really gutsy or silly, one or the other. Third school that was open was Liberty Middle School, where I had been assistant principal. Well, surely. I went through the panel, got to the superintendent, didn't get the job. And the final school was South Anna Elementary. So there were lots of moving parts. So the principal who was at South Anna was the one who was hired to move to Liberty, which left the opening at South Anna. South Anna. I'm like, okay, Lord, this is the fourth of the 4 schools, so something's got to open up. Panel, superintendent, he offered me the job. Thank goodness. But when I think about that, Elwood Kelly was the first person who made me feel at home. Elwood Kelly was the founding principal of South Anna Elementary School.
Very interesting. Yeah.
The serendipity, right? I believe that there are pings and points at which our lives bounce, and I had to bounce from one thing to the other to get to the place where I was supposed to land. And South Anna it's where I lived. I live in that community now. It's my community. It was the right school for me. Yeah. There were things that happened while I was at South Anna that I believe I was supposed to grow through. We lost a beloved faculty member, a teacher there. I had the opportunity to lead through that. I had the opportunity to lead through the shooter who came through Ashland. You know, I had the opportunity to do those things. Oh, yeah. And so period. I'll stop right there. So, yeah.
Well, you know, those connections, and you know, I used to go out for interviews to be an assistant principal and then a principal, and I would always end it and say, don't worry, I'm not going to go home and jump off the James River Bridge. And I know your frustration, but you know, things have a way of working out. And if you'd have told me when I graduated from college that I was going to end up being an elementary school principal, I would have told you were crazy. There's no way. And think about that for you, because everything you had done was high school, middle school, and here all of a sudden you're away from kids that would take you out at your knees, and now your kids are going to hug you at your knees. So.
Which is exactly what they did, absolutely. And I'm so thankful that I have had the opportunity to work at every level of public education, because you see it all.
Yeah,
right?
it's really fascinating to be able to, and I had the same privilege too, so I know exactly what you're talking about. I got a question for you here about your degrees. You got the BA in English from Virginia, a master's in teaching from Virginia, and then you went to Virginia Commonwealth University and you earned a Master of Arts degree in English writing and rhetoric, and then you pushed it a little bit further. You went back to the University of Virginia and earned your educational doctorate. Now, out of those degrees, which one was the toughest to earn?
Probably the doctorate.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that because my life circumstance. So I had just had our first child.
Okay.
And I had just taken I was the principal at the elementary school. So young baby, principal job, doing a doctorate.
Yeah.
Incredibly supportive spouse. James Wilson is awesome. And had it not been for him and the community, right, the support system, my family, his family, we have we call them our Richmond parents. We have like 3 sets of Richmond parents who have wrapped around us over all these years to provide support. So, just juggling all of the pieces with that doctorate, that was really a little bit of a challenge.
You keep stealing my questions. That's good. That's okay. How do you think people in education do what you just walked through? You're working on this degree. You're managing the school. You're managing the family. What pushes people to do that? Why do they hang in like that and pursue those difficult challenges?
Well, I think we all have a set of not just core values, but kind of this deep, gnawing, deep desire to give. Perhaps it's to give back, but I think it's to give. To give, I want to believe that that's deeply rooted in us. Yeah. And so we find a way to give at whatever level makes sense at the time, right? So I think with the ebb and flow of life also comes the ebb and flow of to what extent we can give. So, early in my career, newly establishing a family, newly establishing, kind of our home nest egg, if you will. You want to participate in philanthropic endeavors, but you may not be able to give at the level that you want. So so you give what you can, and if you can't give your riches, you give your talent and your time until you can also give your riches, right? So I think in terms of our professional lives, in terms of our vocation, we give what we can as we can, but because we have deep connections and deep roots about what is important, as we grow and ebb and change, then so does our level of giving. And I think for some, that's easy, can be easy to do, but for others, we have to, I think, reflect, what is it that I am here to do? I think we are all here to give. To what extent? To what? What does that look like?
And it's clear that you've been able to accomplish that in so many different ways. And when you think about that, when you think about your career, particularly in public education, is there one moment, one job that it just brought you the most satisfaction?
That's a hard question. So teaching probably brought me the most, maybe the most affirmation. Because we know that in a number of roles, sometimes thanks don't come regularly, right? But I have on my wall now, I have in my office, I have a poem that was written by one of my students who, I can't quote the poem, but basically she says, she thanks me for being a role model for her through my classroom.
Yeah.
That is like the best thing ever.
Yeah. You know, it's fascinating the way you phrase that, because I think that's one of the things about public education is that you're always in front of people and you never know how you're going to impact someone. And it could be the tiniest thing that you least expect. And I'm sure that's happened to you. You know, you earned degrees at the University of Virginia. You earned a degree at Virginia Commonwealth University. You're dean at the University of Richmond. And when you think about that, your experiences as a student, but also as a leader, what do you think the biggest challenges these universities will face in the next 10 years?
So I think higher education in general is shifting to include, when I was in public schools, you know, we talked about preparing students for work or college or the military. And I think in some ways, when we thought about work, we didn't think about the opportunities for certificates or trades or different avenues to get to whatever this next step is, right? So I think higher education or post-secondary, maybe I'll phrase it that way,
Sure.
that the idea of post-secondary education is broadening, or at least is being talked about more readily. I think we've always recognized that there are multiple things for folks to do post-high school. Right. But we haven't necessarily given the necessary props or appropriate props to vocational, what would be called VOTEC when I was in school,
right.
But career and technical education, yes. Or certifications. Yes. And that is okay. I think we leaned, the pendulum swung a whole lot toward right. College. Yes. And that's where you've got to be. Right. And I think for a lot of families, I think for a lot of parents, it was troublesome or problematic. I think for kids, we perhaps have seen kids who went off to college for whom college was not the right thing at that time, right. And or for what it is they actually wanted to do. Yeah. We know there's value in continuing education, but continuing education can be defined in lots of different ways, which is why I'm incredibly fortunate and proud to be serving as the dean of a school that focuses on continuing education. Right. Because there are a whole lot of different avenues, right? And my own experience with my mother, my grandmother, who went to community college at the age of 63 to achieve her nurse certification, her CNA license. At 63, she and her best friend, right? Because they wanted to sit with older people. It's like, that's great. So that kind of experience tells me that it is this idea of continuing education and holding that up as a value is in me. It's who I am.
Right. That's a good answer. You love the English language. You have a favorite author, favorite book?
Favorite author is probably, believe it or not, Shakespeare. Ooh. Favorite play, probably Othello. Okay. Or maybe Macbeth. So I have this appreciation for people struggling to find who they are and having to go through, kind of this discovery period.
Right.
So Shakespeare with those two plays, but then more modern, To Kill a Mockingbird,
Oh, yeah.
Harper Lee,
Yeah.
and Scout's discovery of who she is,
Sure.
and Jem's discovery of who he is. Yeah, so all of that, right? So all of that, yeah.
That's a terrific answer. I struggled with Willie Shakespeare as an English major, but I have an appreciation there, so I appreciate your honesty. I know you served on the Virginia Board of Education, and I'm wondering from that position how concerned you and your fellow board members were about teacher morale in public schools. And how do school leaders find ways to support teachers in very challenging environments that they work in every day? How do we deal with helping those teachers?
I wish there were a ready answer. I really don't know how, because what we know is that even pre-pandemic, right? So let's just take it pre-pandemic.
Right.
That the levels of stress and responsibility that teachers bear is enormous.
Yeah.
We know that the expectations continue to mount. We, from the policy level, so from the board perspective, one of the things that we tried to do was to recognize the need to deliver a high-quality education for public schools in Virginia. That's what the Board of Education is designed to do. But also, how does that high-quality public education get delivered? It's delivered in classrooms and in schools. So how do we balance the expectation from a policy perspective to the implementation at the building and school level? And sometimes they are not easily reconciled.
Yeah.
Often policies are driven by the General Assembly, and it becomes the purview of the board. Legislation is driven by the General Assembly, and it's the purview of the board to develop policy that aligns to the legislation. So it starts with in many cases, it starts with legislation.
Right.
And as a board, you try to honor the legislation, but recognizing that there's the other side of this, right? And I don't know that I don't have a ready answer for how we help teachers manage through all of that.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's acknowledging that this is really tough, that education is tough. And somebody was listening to something, and they were saying, we're telling teachers they need to take care of themselves. They don't have time to take, so the mounting, right? And so even just saying you should take your time adds a level of stress, or you should take care of yourself, adds a level of stress because we know so all of it, it's a cycle.
Yeah, it is. And you're absolutely right about that cycle. You described it earlier. Back down and home, back pick up, and that's probably 100% more now than it was when you and I were in the classroom. I'm wondering about your work at the University of Richmond. If you see opportunities for the university to work with houses of worship addressing community issues, is there something there that?
Yeah, I think there is. So there are a number of organizations, yes, houses of worship, synagogues, churches, nonprofit organizations. There are so many big-hearted, good-hearted, well-meaning people here in our community, and everybody wants to help. Including the universities, right? The challenge that I see is twofold. One, having ears to hear what the receiving entity needs versus what I want to give, right? Yeah. That's one. The other challenge is becoming aligned as this various group of individual organizations that really want to help, everybody being on the same page, right? And I think we all have our own interests, our own thoughts about what will make a difference. Well, we just need to do X.
Yeah.
And why don't they just do Y?
Yeah.
Well, that may work, but what is it that the people who are actually in schools or working with young people, what are they saying they need?
Yeah.
And how can we deliver on that without strings attached?
Yeah.
And sometimes we want to attach strings. Well, I'll do that, but I need you to listen to X, Y, and Z.
Sure.
Well, I'll listen, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I have to agree. I am, and giving the grace and the acknowledging the responsibility of those who are actually in the roles to do the work. And there's a level of trust that I think that is challenged because we have seen slippage in student achievement. We have seen slippage in terms of parental engagement. And so it erodes, those actions actually erode trust, which then in turn means that I want to then control. And that, I think, is some of where we are in terms of public education.
Yeah, I would agree with you wholeheartedly. There's so much there that you have to think about and consider and understand. But I agree with you. The listening and talking is so critical. And, I was involved in a Zoom conversation this morning. I saw you talking with Brad Brooker earlier with the Tuckahoe YMCA about the same thing. How do you connect? How do you help people in our backyards get the things that they need that are truly make a difference in them without getting in their way? How do you do that? That's a really interesting piece. Just curious, you've worked with so many different people in your career in so many different settings. What's your magic in working with difficult people?
Listening.
Yeah.
Listening.
Okay.
I don't think any of us, most of us, wake up and say, how can I be difficult today?
All right.
I do think that we become, or we are perceived as difficult when, because folks have not heard us, because I feel like I'm not valued, because I feel like you're not listening to me, I become, in turn, frustrated. And that frustration comes out as being difficult, translates. And I don't believe that that's really what people intend. So I try really hard to see whatever situation from the other person's view. I try to put myself in their position.
Right.
And I have said to myself, what has happened that makes this person believe that this is the best way for them to be heard?
Mm-hmm.
So trying to understand and work backward, right? And once I try to understand that, then that, I hope, is clearing my head of what I'm thinking to really hear and listen and discern what it is they are actually saying under the emotion, outside of the facial expression, outside of the high pitch or the loud pitch. What is the message, right? So separating the message from the messenger and how the messenger appears or presents in front of me. What is the message that this individual is trying to send me? And when I focus on that, I can ask the right questions to really get to the it. And then we can get past the other stuff, because then the person then realizes, I'm really trying to understand them, and I'm not reacting to the emotion that I see. It's not always easy, but that's what I try to do.
You're absolutely right. It's not always easy. So I want to wrap up with this along those same lines, okay? Obviously you're grounded in hope and faith. You wouldn't have made it this far if you weren't somewhere along the line. And then taking just what you just said, because I got to wrap up here pretty quick. When you think about America, okay, do you have a glimmer of hope for America that we can work through our division, our challenges, our difficulty? What are you thinking about that?
There's always hope.
Okay.
Because hope is in each and every individual. So our country, our community is comprised of whatever number of individuals.
Right.
But if each one of us takes the position about ourselves individually, what can I do? What should I do? What am I capable of doing, willing to do, to change for the better? That's the hope.
Right.
And if we each take that responsibility, there's nothing that can't happen. It may take time, but there's always hope. Hope is to believe in tomorrow.
Right.
And I do.
I appreciate that. I appreciate everything that you've said this evening, and I hope you don't have too much heartburn. So we're at the point now where we're going to take some questions from folks that might be watching at home. If you're watching at home, we'd ask you to use the chat box. That's a feature of this virtual broadcast. If you're here in the sanctuary with us, we'd ask that you simply go to the microphone in the middle of the room there. That microphone should be on, and we'll take some questions, and then we'll wrap up. So, Hung Soo, I'm going to look to you. If you get anything, send them to me. Go from there. We didn't pay these people to show up this evening, Dr. Wilson, but this is the biggest crowd we've had. So, and this is a real talkative group, and I can't believe that they're not asking you some questions, but that's okay. So, this is Mary Neary, a longtime Trinity member and a real staunch supporter of this type of
It's so nice to be with you tonight. We really appreciate your being here. I was interested that you started your career at Lee Davis, and I wondered what you thought about all the renaming of things here in Richmond, how that felt then and how it feels now, that kind of thing.
So I'll have to be honest and say I am at times naive or kind of a peaceable kind of person, right? So I had actually a friend of mine ask, when you were at Lee Davis, did the names bother you when you were there? It bothered me, yes. Not just the names, but the outward displays and conversations that I had with young people. Now, they're young people. Young people repeat what they have heard, before forming necessarily their own opinions. So the Confederate flags rolling around, yeah, that bothered me, but it didn't have a direct effect on me, right? So nobody swung the flag right in my face. The point at which I realized this is more than just my assumption, that it was more than just the flag and this, the idea of heritage, that there really was something else to it. So the Confederate flag, to me, represents a period in history that was not our finest moment as a country. That's my view. And I was teaching a class of 12th graders, and we had finished whatever the lesson was for the day, and we were waiting for the bell to ring. And these young men who happened to be white said, they were talking about good black people and bad black people. And I said, tell me about that. What do you mean by that? And come on, Miss Smith, good black people know when to stay in their place. Now, I could have responded in a way that would have, right, sent everything out. I didn't. I tried to listen. So what is it that these young people think or have been exposed to about various races that would make them, one, say something like that or believe something like that and then be willing to say it to my face, right? Like, wow. So yes, the names bothered me as they were coupled with action, activity, etc. The renaming that has gone on here around the city, I absolutely understand that names mean something. We give our children names because they mean something to us. We name because it means something. And so when I think about what the actual or intended meaning is versus the perceived meaning, right? And slice and dice it that way, I think we have to listen to what everyone says and not only one view, and make the best decision for the community as a whole. But it is listening to various perspectives and weighing that across the board.
I'm going to assume that you're happy you're not superintendent anymore in Hanover.
Man, you just don't know. I thank the Lord every day. Truly, I am serious. Honestly, to that point, the superintendent in Hanover who had to navigate, or who navigated that period of time, I do wonder, as a Black woman, if I were sitting in the seat of superintendent, how that would have played out. I don't know, but I do wonder about that, right?
Yes.
And maybe I shouldn't wonder about it in those particular terms, but I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I understand that. I think that's a natural human reaction to wonder about that set of circumstances. Had you been in there?
Yeah.
Chris?
Yes. Dr. Wilson, thanks for being with us tonight. I would say anytime a cavalier ultimately becomes a spider, it makes me really happy. But you got my attention when you were talking about post-secondary education, and specifically CTE or vocational education. And the pendulum had swung, to college, and I feel like it's gradually swinging back. I work within Rankin County on a board, and they are turning students away. They don't have enough spaces in their CTE programs for students to get in. But my question is, post-secondary, is there a school of thought, or in the industry, I guess I would say, these kids, when they graduate, I know the one opportunity and I'm in the automotive business, for Ford kids is to go all the way down to Tidewater, to an asset school, where they actually earn an associate's degree. They learn English and math, but they also learn how to work on cars. But in terms of things like running their own business, financial literacy, these kids aren't getting that. So my question would be, is there a school of thought? Are these things coming down the road? Because I think there's a big demographic, and it's going to keep getting larger over time.
Thank you, Chris, for that question. So in terms of financial literacy, I think curriculum has to keep up with the demands of what young people need. And there is a financial literacy requirement at the high school level. Many, I don't know the percentage, but a number of students may take that during the summer as an online course. There are a number of modules that you would complete. It strikes me that perhaps an opportunity might be to enhance that basic curriculum to include business ownership or business literacy alongside basic personal financial literacy, right? And the challenge, of course, is that there are only a certain number of hours in a day or a number of credits that a young person can take in the course of their high school career. So how do you figure out how to integrate those other curricular areas to provide the most well-rounded opportunity for young people? And then you think about, so how many students would actually want or need that, and how do we put that together in a way that's going to be, more than 2 kids, for example, in a class. You fill out a class, you've got some economic economies of scale that you want to reach in terms of how you deliver this, what does the curriculum actually look like, is it appropriate or applicable across multiple segments, industries, etc. I think it can be done. It does, though, take time to figure out what those pieces are needed in order to create this well-rounded opportunity for young people that's going to serve them after high school or in their further education or even vocational opportunity. Does that help?
We're going to take one question from a viewer at home. Dr. Wilson, you talked about the deep desire to give. I think that is a way to break down the walls and divisions we have built in this broken world. What motivations can impel the desire to give?
Well, I think maybe starting with the last question you asked me about hope. So what is it that an individual is hopeful for? And then how might my actions help me reach that thing I am so hopeful for? And those actions, whether it's giving of time, talent, treasure, etc., if it's attention, whatever it is, but starting with, what is it you want to see? What is it that you're hopeful for? And then what can I do to actually move the needle ahead in those areas? I think that's what giving is, and that's what can really compel us to move. As well as thinking about what is my purpose here? Why am I occupying the space that I am at the particular time that I am for a greater good, whatever that greater good is? Where do I fit, right, in that? So I think that's where we start with, what's compelling.
It's tough to figure out, but I'm going to go with you and be hopeful that we can. Okay. So one more question. Ann, go ahead.
Yes, this is an easy, short one for you. As an alumna of the University of Richmond, I'm wondering what falls under your umbrella of the School of Professional and Continuing Studies?
Thank you.
What all besides OSHA does it include?
Yes, so we offer degree program completion at the undergraduate level. So folks who come to us with some number of credits from either community college, or maybe they started at VCU or Longwood or wherever, they need to finish their undergraduate degrees. So degree completion. We also have master's degrees in nonprofit studies, liberal arts, human resource management, and education. That's one business line, if you will, degree program. Second business line is professional education or professional certifications, things like coding, data analytics, interior decorating, believe it or not. Shorter time to completion, usually about 6 months or so, 140 hours of instruction, where at the end of that time you are able to take away a certificate, not a degree, but a certificate that says I've achieved these competencies or skills. And then the third area is lifelong learning, of which OSHA is a part, but it also includes individual courses. And so the way we like to think of the 3 lines is actually 3 cords that could be braided together. So different on-ramps and off-ramps to continuing education. Perhaps I just want to get my toe wet in something, so I take an individual course as a lifelong learning opportunity. That might lead me then to wanting to go deeper and expand to a professional certification. And oh, by the way, after I've got that, maybe I need to have a degree, or vice versa. I've already have my undergraduate degree. I need to upskill and reskill in this technology area, as an example, or I want to get into another area of profession, or I just want to know more. So seeing those 3 as interconnected and interwoven to create this tapestry, this fabric that's really going to help propel the entire community to moving to the next and the next and the next, whatever it is folks want to do. That's how we see ourselves serving the Richmond region. I know you said it was a quick answer, but you know I.
It was a great answer. And thanks for asking. So we're going to wrap it up. Dr. Wilson, we want to thank you for taking the time to be with us this evening.
Thank you so much for having me.
I know we've learned a lot, and we thank you for sharing your leadership with us. Thanks again for all you're doing to help the education process in our community. We know that you are a giver and that you will keep giving. To our viewers, we appreciate you joining us tonight. Those here in the sanctuary, we appreciate you being here. We'll hope you join us on Thursday, May 5th, when our guest will be Trinity member Art Utley. We're going to be talking with Art about his career in journalism with local newspapers. In closing, I want to thank the Trinity staff for their help in coordinating this event this evening. I want to thank our associate pastor, Hung Soo Lim, for handling the technology and our behind-the-scenes communication specialist, Kim Johnson. And hiding up there in the balcony, I think, is Bobby McShaw. Thank him for helping get the building open for us this evening so we can have this. Thank you all for being here. Take care, be safe, and thanks.